The snow fell silent that February morning, blanketing Timber Ridge in a cold so deep it stole breath from lungs. Ruth Winslow stepped out of the general store, flour sacks heavy in her arms, and saw the children first. Two small figures knelt in the snow across the street, their cries piercing the stillness. The boy, maybe 8 years old, was shaking a man's shoulder. The girl, younger, screamed for her papa. Ruth's boots hit the icy boardwalk before her mind caught up. She crossed the street, dropping her supplies in the snow. The man lay face down, unmoving. She recognized him, Levi Dawson, the widower who lived 5 miles south, worked himself half to death since his wife passed 3 years back. A crowd gathered, but no one moved closer. Mrs. Brennan, the town matchmaker, clutched her shawl. Poor man's been working 3 days without sleep, trying to finish that fence before the next storm. Someone help him, Ruth said. Kneeling, she pressed 2 fingers to his neck. Pulse weak, but steady. Ain't proper for a widow woman to, someone muttered. Ruth ignored them. She looked at the boy. What's your name? Tommy, he whispered. Is Papa dying? Not if I can help it. Child, not today. She turned to the blacksmith. Fetch my wagon. Now. The man hesitated, looking at the others. Ruth's voice sharpened. Now! He moved. Ruth and the blacksmith lifted Levi into the wagon bed, his body limp and fevered. The children climbed in beside their father. Ruth gathered the reins. Warren Kent, the banker, stepped forward. Mrs. Winslow, this is highly irregular. So is leaving a man to freeze while his children watch. She snapped the reins. The wagon lurched forward. As they disappeared down the snowy trail, Mrs. Brennan whispered to Kent, That woman's always been too independent for her own good. Kent's eyes narrowed. Independence has a price, she'll learn. Out here, you don't judge a person's past, you judge what they do when the snow comes. Ruth had heard those words from her late husband. She lived by them now, behind her. Tommy held his sister close. Hope buried her face in her brother's coat. Still crying, Ruth didn't look back. She drove toward her cabin, toward warmth, toward the choice she'd just made without thinking. The sky darkened. More snow was coming. Levi woke to unfamiliar walls and the smell of herb tea. His head pounded. Firelight danced across rough-hewn logs, where children's laughter. He turned his head, wincing. Tommy stood beside a woman at the stove, stirring something in a pot. Hope sat at a wooden table, arranging corn-husk dolls. The woman turned, Ruth Winslow. Levi tried to sit up. Easy, she said, crossing to the bed. She pressed a hand to his shoulder firm, not gentle. You've got fever and 3 days of exhaustion. Blacksmith said you haven't slept. I can't, his voice cracked. I can't be here. People will talk. My children. Your children need a living father, not a dead hero. Ruth's tone was flat, practical. She handed him a tin cup. Drink. Willow bark tea. He drank. Bitter. But the warmth helped. Outside, wind howled. Snow battered the windows. The storm hit an hour after we got here, Ruth said. We're trapped for a spell. 3 days. Maybe more. Panic rose in Levi's chest. I have to get back. The livestock. Already moved to my barn. Your cow. Your 2 horses. The chickens. Tommy helped. She nodded toward his son, who beamed with pride. Levi's throat tightened. He'd promised himself, promised his wife's memory, that he'd never need another woman's help, that he'd raise their children alone, prove he was enough, but he wasn't enough. The fever, the exhaustion, the collapse, all proof of his failure. Rest, Ruth said. Storm's not asking your permission. That night, the 3rd night, Levi couldn't sleep. He watched Ruth through the doorway. She was in the barn, splitting wood by lantern light. Her movements were efficient, tireless. Scars marked her hands' years of hard work. Tommy whispered from his bedroll, "Pa, is she going to be our new mama?" Levi's chest ached. "No. Son, we're just borrowing her kindness. She's nice. She don't treat us like we're broken." Levi closed his eyes. His wife's last words echoed, "Promise me you'll find them a mother." He'd promised. But every woman the town suggested felt wrong. They pitied his children, pitied him. Ruth didn't pity anyone. The storm broke at dawn. Pale sunlight filtered through the windows. Levi stood, shaky but determined. "We need to go." Ruth didn't argue. She bundled the children, packed their things. As Levi lifted Hope into his arms, the girl looked back at Ruth. "Will we see you again?" Ruth's face softened just for a moment. "Reckon you will, child." They left. Levi didn't look back, though everything in him wanted to. Pride's a cold companion in winter. Ruth had said he was learning the truth of it. A man's only as rich as the people who will stand with him in a storm. Another of his late wife's sayings. Levi wondered if she'd sent Ruth to him, if promises could be kept in unexpected ways. A week later, Levi returned to Ruth's cabin. He carried a toolbox and his father's old hammer. She was mending a bridle on the porch, her hands steady. "Came to repay you," he said. Ruth didn't look up. "Don't recall asking for payment. You need a new roof. Saw the leak over the kitchen. And your wood pile's low." She met his eyes then. Hers were gray as winter sky. Guarded. "You don't owe me charity." "It's not charity. It's the way things are done." He set down the toolbox. "Out here, we help each other. That's how we survive." Ruth stood slowly. "Fine. But this makes us even. No debt either way." Agreed. He worked through the morning. Ruth watched from the window, unable to stop herself. His hands moved like Samuel's had, careful, skilled. Every motion reminded her of building this cabin with her husband 5 years ago. Samuel. Dead 2 winters now, shot by claim jumpers when he rode out to check the fences. She'd found his body frozen in the snow. The town had whispered she should have stopped him, should have kept him home, as if his death were her fault. She'd learned then depend on no one, need no one, survive alone. But watching Levi work, something old and buried stirred in her chest. She crushed it down. Levi had his own ghosts. His wife, Grace, had died birthing Hope 3 years back. She'd bled out in their bed, whispering her last words. "Promise me you'll find them a mother. Someone kind. Someone who'll love them." He'd promised, but he'd failed. Every woman Mrs. Brennan introduced him to treated his children like wounded creatures. They offered pity, not love. Ruth didn't pity anyone. She expected the children to work, to learn, to stand on their own feet. Tommy had thrived in those 3 storm-bound days. Around noon, Tommy and Hope arrived, racing across the snow. "Papa, can we play by the pond?" "Stay off the ice," Levi called. "It's not safe." But children forget warnings. 20 minutes later, Hope's scream split the air. Levi dropped his hammer. Ruth bolted from the cabin. They reached the pond together. Hope had chased Tommy onto the ice. It cracked beneath her. She plunged through, disappearing into black water. Levi and Ruth dove in without hesitation. The cold was a fist closing around Ruth's lungs. She grabbed Hope, shoved her toward Levi. He caught the girl, dragged her to shore. Ruth followed, gasping. They stumbled into the cabin. Ruth built up the fire while Levi stripped the children's wet clothes, wrapped them in every blanket they had. Hope's lips were blue. Tommy shook violently. Ruth made hot tea, forced it into their hands. Levi knelt before them, his voice breaking. "You could have died, both of you." "We're sorry, Papa," Tommy whispered. Levi pulled them close. Ruth turned away, her own hands trembling. She remembered losing 3 babies stillborn. Every one. Remembered the silence after each birth. The weight of empty arms. "I can't do this alone anymore," Levi said quietly. Ruth froze. She didn't turn around. "I know you want to be strong," he continued. "I know you think needing help makes you weak, but it doesn't. It just makes you human." Ruth's hands clenched. "Then don't," she whispered. "What?" She faced him. "Don't do it alone. None of us can." Thunder rumbled in the distance, another storm coming. But something had shifted between them, broken open, like ice cracking on a pond. Good fences make good neighbors, but strong hands build homes. The words were carved over Ruth's door. Levi saw them now, understood them differently. He reached out, touched Ruth's shoulder. She didn't pull away. Outside, the sky darkened. Inside, the fire burned warm. 3 weeks passed. Levi came every other day fixing the roof, splitting wood, mending fences. Ruth cooked extra stew, sent portions home with him. The children visited, helping her feed the chickens, learning to card wool. It was March now, mud season. The snow melted into thick brown soup that clung to boots and wagon wheels. Timber Ridge came alive again after winter's silence. Sunday morning arrived bright and cold. Levi stood outside the church, Tommy and Hope beside him, dressed in their best clothes. Through the open door, he saw Ruth sitting alone in the back pew. She sat straight-backed, chin high, but the space around her was empty. No one sat near the widow who'd taken in a man unchaperoned, who'd broken propriety to save his life. Mrs. Brennan intercepted Levi on the steps. "Mr. Dawson, a word." He nodded to his children. "Go inside." "Save me a seat." Mrs. Brennan's voice dropped. "That Winslow woman, she's too hard for a man with soft children. You need a proper wife. Someone gentle, refined." She smiled. "I've written to a lady in Denver. Young widow, educated, excellent with children. She arrives on the spring train." Levi's jaw tightened. "I didn't ask you to. You need help, dear man. Everyone can see it. And Mrs. Winslow..." She glanced through the door. "Well, she's been alone too long, set in her ways. Not the mothering type." Inside, Preacher Morrison began his sermon. The text was charity loving thy neighbor, judging not, but his eyes kept drifting to Ruth, pointed and cold. Levi listened from the doorway. Around him, the congregation shifted uncomfortably. Ruth sat motionless, staring straight ahead. Then the preacher said, "Some among us claim charity while flouting decency. We must ask ourselves, what example do we set for our children?" Levi's blood ran cold. He understood. This sermon was about Ruth, about him. He stood. Every head turned. Levi walked down the center aisle, crossing the invisible line that separated Ruth from the respectable. Families. He reached her pew. "Ma'am, is this seat taken?" Ruth's eyes widened. Her hands trembled in her lap. "It's been empty a long time. Mr. Dawson? Reckon it's yours if you want it." He sat. Tommy and Hope scrambled from their pew, squeezing in beside Ruth. Hope took her hand. The church fell silent. Mrs. Brennan fanned herself. Warren Kent's eyes narrowed from his seat near the front. The preacher stumbled through the rest of his sermon. After the benediction, people filed out quickly, avoiding eye contact. But Elder Henry Doyle, an old rancher whose wife had died the previous year, stopped beside Levi. He shook his hand. "Took courage. Son, the kind that matters." Outside, The spring sun was warm. Ruth breathed deeply, her shoulders loosening. Then Warren Kent appeared. "Mrs. Winslow, we need to discuss your mortgage. It's overdue." Ruth's face went pale. "I'll have the payment next month. The wool—" "I'm afraid next month won't do." Kent's smile was cold. "Come see me this week. We'll discuss options." He walked away. Levi turned to Ruth. "What's he talking about?" "Nothing I can't handle." But her voice shook. Tommy tugged Levi's sleeve. "Papa, why is everyone so mean to Miss Ruth?" Levi knelt. "Because they're scared, son. Of anything different. Anything that challenges how they think things should be." Hope looked up at Ruth. "You're not scary." Ruth's eyes filled. She touched the girl's hair. "Thank you, sweet child. The land doesn't care about your heartbreak. It cares if you can work it." Samuel had said that once. Ruth had lived by it. But now she wondered if working the land was enough when the land could be stolen from under her. That night, alone in her cabin, Ruth pulled out her mortgage papers. 3 months overdue. She'd spent everything on feed and seed, betting on the wool harvest. But Kent could foreclose any time he wanted, 5 miles away. Levi lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Mrs. Brennan's words echoed. The Denver widow arrives on the spring train. He didn't want the Denver widow. He wanted Ruth. But wanting wasn't having. Not in a world that judged every step, every choice. Midnight. Ruth woke to desperate knocking. She grabbed her rifle, opened the door. Levi stood there, snow in his hair. "It's the mare. She's in trouble." Ruth didn't ask questions. She pulled on her boots, grabbed her coat, followed him to the barn. The pregnant mare lay on her side, breathing hard. Ruth knelt, ran her hands over the swollen belly. "Foal's breech. We need to turn it." "Can you—" "I've done it before." She rolled up her sleeves. "Get me hot water, clean rags, and hold her steady." They worked in the circle of lantern light. Ruth's hands disappeared inside the mare, feeling for the foal's position. Sweat ran down her face. The mare screamed, "Easy, girl." Levi murmured, stroking her neck, "Easy now." An hour passed. 2. Ruth's arms ached. Then finally she felt the shift. The foal turned. Got it. Here it comes. The foal emerged in a rush of fluid and membrane. Ruth cleared its nose, rubbed it with straw. After a terrible moment, it gasped, breathed. The mare struggled to her feet, nuzzling her baby. The foal's legs wobbled, but it stood. Ruth sat back, exhausted. Her hands shook. Levi handed her a rag. She wiped her face. "You saved them both," he said softly. Ruth watched the foal nurse. Tears ran down her cheeks sudden. Unstoppable. "Samuel and I—" Her voice broke. "We lost 3 babies, all stillborn. I held them, named them, buried them. This is the first birth I've seen that didn't end in death." Levi knelt beside her. "I'm sorry. I didn't know. No one does. After the 3rd. The town said I was cursed. That God was punishing me for something." She laughed bitterly. "Maybe he was. Maybe that's why Samuel died too." "Ruth, no. My wife's last words," Levi said, "were, 'Promise me you'll find them a mother.' I promised. But every woman the town suggests, it feels like betrayal. Like I'm erasing grace." Ruth looked at him. "What do you want, Levi? You." He said simply, "I want you. Not because you're convenient, or proper, or what the town expects, because you're strong where I'm weak. Because my children laugh when you're around, because you don't need me. But you choose to help anyway. I'm not a replacement for your wife." "No, you're not." He touched her hand. Maybe they'd want us to live. Ruth, not just survive. Live. The words hung between them. The foal stumbled, steadied, nursed again. Ruth leaned toward him. Levi's breath caught. Their faces were inches apart. Then Ruth pulled back sharply. I can't. I'm not ready. I'm sorry. She stood, fled the barn. Levi remained, watching the newborn foal, understanding that some things, maybe the most important things, came the hard way. Out here, we plant in spring what we hope to harvest in fall. Sometimes the seeds are second chances. But first, the ground had to thaw. The frost had to break. And that took time, patience, and more courage than facing down any storm. Warren Kent arrived at Ruth's cabin on a cold April morning. He rode a fine black horse, his clerk following with saddlebags full of papers. Ruth was mending fence when she saw them. She set down her tools, wiped her hands on her apron. Mrs. Winslow, Kent said, not dismounting, we need to discuss your mortgage. I told you next month. The wool will not be enough. He nodded to his clerk, who produced a document. You're 3 months overdue. I could foreclose today. Ruth's hands clenched. The law says I have 6 months. The law says I have discretion. Kent finally dismounted, stepped close. However, I'm prepared to be generous. Forgive the entire debt. Wipe it clean. In exchange for what? His smile was cold. Marriage. Mrs. Winslow, you need a husband. I need a wife. It's practical. Ruth's stomach turned. Kent was wealthy, respectable, and utterly without warmth. His first wife had died silent and unhappy. I'd rather lose my land than sell myself. Kent's expression hardened. Pride's expensive. Where will you go when I foreclose back east to beg family? There's nothing for lone women here. You know that. He remounted. 30 days. Mrs. Winslow. Think carefully. They rode away. Ruth stood in the mud, shaking with rage and fear. That same morning, in town, Mrs. Brennan cornered Levi outside the Mercantile. The Denver widow arrives on the spring train. 2 weeks. Mr. Dawson. I've arranged for you to meet her. She's lovely, 26, educated, played piano, perfect for your children. Levi's mind spun. Ruth would lose her land. She'd have nowhere to go. If he married the Denver woman, he'd have stability, money. He could help Ruth as a neighbor. Without scandal, it made sense. It was practical. I'll think about it, he heard himself say. Mrs. Brennan beamed. Wonderful. You're making the right choice. That evening, Ruth came to town for supplies. She needed to see Levi, to tell him about Kent's ultimatum. Maybe together they could find a solution. She passed the church, through the open door. She heard voices. If I marry the Denver woman, Levi was saying, I'll have stability, money. I can help Ruth without scandal. As a neighbor. It's the right thing to do. Preacher Morrison's voice. Sometimes the right thing requires sacrifice. My son. Ruth didn't wait to hear more. She walked back to her wagon, mounted, drove home through the gathering dark. Her chest felt hollow. She'd been a fool. She'd let herself hope, let herself imagine a future. But Levi would do what was proper, what the town expected. And she would lose everything. At his own farm, Levi stared at the ceiling that night. He'd said the words, but they tasted like ash. The right thing, sacrifice. But what if doing the right thing meant choosing wrong when a man talks about what's proper? Usually means he's forgot what's right. His father had told him that, years ago. Levi was beginning to understand. Outside, spring rain began to fall cold, relentless, washing nothing clean. 4 days later, Levi went looking for Ruth. She hadn't been to town, hadn't answered when he knocked on her door. Her wagon sat unused in the barn. He found her in the cemetery, kneeling at her husband's grave. Rain soaked through her coat. She was weeping the first tears she'd shed since Samuel died. Levi approached slowly. "Ruth." She didn't look up. "Go away." "No." He knelt beside her in the mud. "Talk to me." "I told Samuel I'd never love again." Her voice broke. "I told him I'd keep this place alone, that loving him meant staying faithful. But I'm so tired." "Levi, I'm so tired of being strong, of being alone, of pretending I don't need anyone." "You don't have to pretend, not with me." "Yes, I do. Because you're marrying the Denver woman. You're doing the proper thing." She finally looked at him, eyes red. "And I'll lose my land because I was foolish enough to hope." Levi's heart cracked open. "I'm not marrying her. I heard you at the church. I know what you heard, and I was wrong." He took her hands. "My wife told me to find the children a mother. I thought that meant replacing her, finding someone who looked right, acted right. But you're not a replacement. Ruth, you're the answer to her prayer. She wanted them loved. You love them. And I want them," Ruth whispered. "I want all of you, but the town. Kent, let them come. We'll fight. Together." He pulled her close. "I don't want proper. I don't want convenient. I want you. You and me and those kids and that damn foal and muddy boots and morning coffee and growing old together." Ruth pressed her face against his chest. "What if we're making a mistake? What if we're not ready? We'll never be ready. But we'll be together." "That's enough." She looked up at him. Rain mixed with tears on her face. "The town will crucify us. Kent will destroy me. Let him try." Above them, thunder rolled. Ruth thought of Samuel, of the promises she'd made over his grave. But maybe promises changed. Maybe love wasn't betrayal. Maybe opening her heart again honored what she'd lost instead of diminishing it. "I'm afraid," she said. "So am I." Levi smiled. "We'll be afraid together." She kissed him, then fierce, desperate, full of all the loneliness and hope she'd buried for 2 years. He held her like she was the last solid thing in a world of flood and storm. When they broke apart, Ruth laughed raw and real. "We're a mess. Best kind of mess." They stood together before the graves his wife's. Her husband's honoring the past while choosing the future. The rain poured down. They were soaked, muddy, freezing, and for the first time in years. Ruth felt warm. A good horse knows the way home even in the dark. Sometimes you just gotta trust and ride. They walked back to her cabin hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next. Together. The town hall was packed. Every citizen of Timber Ridge had come for the foreclosure hearing. Ruth stood before the council table, alone. Warren Kent sat at the head. Mortgage papers spread before him like weapons. Levi entered with Tommy and Hope. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Brennan clutched her shawl, scandalized. Kent rapped the table. "Mrs. Winslow, you've had 30 days. Do you have the payment?" "No." "And then under the terms of your mortgage, I am empowered to foreclose and seize the property." He looked at the council members. "Unless you accept my previous offer." Ruth's jaw tightened. "I will not marry you." "Then you leave me no choice." "Wait." Levi stepped forward. He held a rolled document. "I'm offering my property as collateral for Mrs. Winslow's debt." Gasps. Kent's smile faltered. "You'd bankrupt yourself for a woman you're not even married to." "I'd do it for my family." Tommy stood on his chair. "Miss Ruth saved Papa's life. She taught me to read. She's our family." Hope's small voice carried through the room. "She braids my hair like Mama did. I love her." Mrs. Brennan dabbed her eyes. Several women murmured approval. Kent's face reddened. "This is highly irregular. The council will not—" The council will hear all options. Elder Henry Doyle stood from the back. Mr. Kent, you're a wealthy man. This debt means nothing to you. But crushing this woman, that's not justice. That's cruelty. The law. The law allows compassion. Doyle walked to the front. My wife died last year. I know what loneliness costs. These two found something decent in this hard world. I won't see it destroyed by greed. He placed a bank draft on the table. I'll cover Mrs. Winslow's mortgage, in full. Kent stared at the draft. The amount was correct, more than correct. He'd been outmaneuvered. Preacher Morrison stood. Perhaps we should ask ourselves who among us survives winter alone who hasn't needed help. Mercy. A second chance. Kent's clerk whispered urgently. Other council members shifted uncomfortably. Public opinion had turned. Kent gathered his papers. This is irregular, but I see the council lacks the spine for proper business. He stood. Mrs. Winslow, your mortgage is satisfied. Congratulations. He stormed out. The room erupted in conversation. Ruth couldn't move. Levi took her hand. Tommy and Hope rushed to her, wrapping their arms around her waist. Elder Doyle smiled. Young lady, you've got good people around you. Don't forget it. I won't, sir. Thank you. Mrs. Brennan approached, surprising everyone. Mrs. Winslow, I may have misjudged. You've been good to those children. Sometimes love finds its own way, I suppose. Ruth nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Outside. The spring sun was warm. Hope tugged Ruth's skirt. Does this mean you're staying? Yes, sweet child, I'm staying. Tommy grinned. Forever. Ruth looked at Levi. He smiled, squeezed her hand. Forever, she said. In hard country, you judge a man by who stands with him when the wolves circle. The town had judged, and for once, they'd chosen right. The wedding would be quiet. They decided, just family and Elder Doyle. But today, standing in the spring sunshine with the children between them, it felt like the hardest part was over. They'd faced the town. They'd faced their ghosts. They'd chosen each other. Now came the building, the real work, the life. And they were ready. July arrived with wildflowers and warm wind. The cabin had changed, expanded, repaired, made new. Levi and Ruth had worked side by side through spring, adding a room for the children, fixing the roof, planting a garden that now burst with life. The foal ran circles in the pasture, long-legged and strong. Chickens pecked in the yard. The fence stood solid. Ruth sat on the porch with morning coffee, watching Levi teach Hope to ride. Tommy knelt in the garden, carefully weeding around the tomatoes. They'd married 3 weeks after the town hall meeting. A quiet ceremony, Elder Doyle officiating, the children as witnesses. Vows spoken under a cottonwood tree. Ruth wore a simple blue dress. Levi gave her a silver ring he'd saved for. She wore it now, turning it absently on her finger. Inside the cabin, 2 candles stood on the mantel. One for Samuel, one for Grace. Every evening, Ruth lit them both. Levi had helped her build a memorial garden at her old property, now sold to a young couple from Nebraska. They'd planted roses there, left stones carved with names. Honoring the past didn't mean living there. That was the hardest lesson. But they were learning. The town had come around. Slowly. Mrs. Brennan brought preserves and asked for gardening advice. Families invited them to Sunday dinners. Warren Kent had left Timber Ridge in disgrace, taking a position in Helena. Elder Doyle visited often. He and Levi had become friends, 2 widowers who'd found reasons to keep living. Hope's laughter rang out as the horse trotted. I'm doing it. Mama Ruth, I'm riding. Mama Ruth. The name had come naturally from the children. Ruth had wept the first time, holding them close. Tommy ran to the porch. Mama Ruth, the tomatoes are getting big. Can we make preserves like Grandma Doyle taught us? We can. Love. This afternoon. She'd never carried a child to term, but these 2 were hers now fully, Completely. Some families were born, some were built. Hers was built from storm and struggle, from choosing love over fear. Levi joined her on the porch, settling beside her with his own coffee. His arm went around her shoulders. "Happy?" he asked. "Terrified," she said honestly, "and happy, both at once. That's how you know it's real." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the children. The morning sun warmed Ruth's face. She thought about the collapse in the snow, the blizzard, the cemetery in the rain. Every hard moment had led here. "Tell me the story," Hope said that evening at dinner. "About when you and Papa saved each other." Ruth smiled. "Well, darling, it started with a collapse in the snow and ended with a stand in a town hall. But really, it started long before that, with two people who'd lost everything learning they could still build something new." Levi squeezed her hand under the table. "After dinner, after the children were asleep, Ruth and Levi sat on the porch watching fireflies dance. The air smelled of hay and roses. 'I'm not afraid anymore,' Ruth whispered. 'Neither am I.' She leaned against him, feeling his heartbeat, steady and strong. Tomorrow they'd wake early, tend the animals, work the garden, build the life they'd chosen. Good things come the hard way through winter storms, muddy spring, and the long work of building something that lasts. The stars wheeled overhead. The prairie stretched dark and vast around them. But here, on this porch, in this circle of light, they were home. The fence stood strong, the garden bloomed, and two broken people, mended by love and labor, watched the night together, whole at last. The end.